My major was aesthetics. So aesthetics explore and study and research about the beauty. We really do our best don't use the word beauty. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, but I want to ask, I want to use the beauty today. Yeah. So how does the concept of the beauty manifest in Korean literature? Is it rooted a specific culture or aesthetical and philosophical tradition? And how does it differentiate itself from the Western literary conceptuations of the beauty?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question. And actually, with this question, I have a much more personal opinion that can be that I can talk about in more straightforward terms. And I think the sub questions that you asked, there's a lot that we can ponder about. But personally, for me, just that from that simple question of what is beauty in Korean literature, it's to do with the Korean literary language. I think any literature from around the world, I think we all share, just in abstract terms, not culture-specific terms, we can have different ideas about what beauty is, and that's why there are scholars and departments you study aesthetics, and I'm not going to go into that. But I think in that sort of the greater question of what is beauty in Korean literature, it's simply Korean literary language. And some people might think, well, Grace, isn't that kind of an obvious answer? I said yes, but, and I think with all literatures, people might say that, but specifically, I mean, my sort of view comes also from a very personal experience as well. So, I grew up between South Korea and the U.S., hence my accent. But I've been in Europe for probably the longest now. And I initially studied, my undergraduate degree was in French and comparative literature. And it was my comparative literature professor at the time who had the wisdom and the kind of insight, especially back then, it still is now, unfortunately, when comparative literature as a subject was very Eurocentric. The theories, it's very, theory-based, which I love theory. I love studying theory. I was one of those, strange students who just, yes, really took to theory. But my professor, and it was Professor Celeste Kang, who actually later became the president of the university where I studied at. And she said, it's very Eurocentric, and I just wondered, can you read Korean? And I said, yes. I've only had formal Korean education just at the right age. So between 9 till 12, I went to Korean school. All my other schooling was in the American and then later the British context. But I said that I can read Korean. She said, do you know Korean literature? I said, well, I know Korean literature, the Korean literature I studied at school when I was in primary and secondary school, but I don't know contemporary fiction. So she was the one who encouraged me, why don't you write an essay on Korean and from a comparative perspective, applying certain theories. And this was the day before online. So when I traveled to Korea, I went to the bookstore, I went to the library, I read, and what really captivated me, I was even at school, when I was at Korean school, I quite enjoyed studying Korean literature. I think it was one of my better subjects. 사회 was not. Too many details. I was never a very good history student because I'm not very good at remembering details and years and things. But I think what really, even as a Korean, what struck me was I read various different novels and books, and the ones that I just, what captivated me was what you might call just eloquently written, where the language had so much cadence. It's that cadence of well-written Korean prose. Just mesmerized me. So it wasn't just about the content and the theme, but it was the kind of writing, the literary works where the writing just was just mesmerized. I keep repeating that word. And it's the kind of language that, again, in Korea, you might call it lyricism, 서정적이다, you know, Korean lyricism. And I say to my British friends who don't know Korean language or who are unfamiliar with Korean literature, I have to tell them, well, Korean is actually a phonetic, in terms of the written script, it's a phonetic script, because they initially think, oh, is it like Chinese? Are they? I said, no, they're not ideographs. It's like a phonetic system. And I think in all the writings, just the flow of it, if you read it out loud, just the way it sounds sometimes, at least the ones where, you know, what I call great literature, and makes use of that, our language, you know, the Korean language, in such a beautiful and clever way. And the language is so beautiful. But basically, the author becomes almost like a craftsperson, a creator, who turns like a piece of wood into something beautiful. But the material is there, you know, it's there, into a beautiful like piece of furniture or, you know, an object d'art. Right? And especially I think, with literature that makes use of colloquial language, expressions, in a way that really expresses what we might call, you know, Korean day-to-day lives, cultural expressions, the things that make us laugh, you know, even humor, or when you go to events and when someone talks about, when we have authors who give talks, and I've interpreted on many occasions, and we have Korean audiences, and we have audience members who don't know Korean, and then when the author says something really funny, and it's very like, using pure Korean expressions and things, and the Korean audience members laugh. You know, the things that really sort of, as a people, we can relate to. And people would say, oh, it's difficult to translate. It's untranslatable, right? But it's that kind of, in a country where for a long time, Korean was always spoken. But because the writing script, Hangul wasn't created until the mid-15th century. And so for a long time, it was classical Chinese was the written sort of language, but only exclusively available to a minority group of elite men, right? And I've studied Korean classical, you know, literature, and I love it, but it's not quite the same as those that are written in the vernacular script, even when it comes to poetry, which essentially conveys the spoken language, the day-to-day, the kind of cultural heritage, the humor, the sort of tongue-in-cheek remarks, but also the beauty, and also just the sound, I think, personally, for me, above and beyond themes, topics, those are important too. But I think the Korean literary language is one that I think is essential to this notion of beauty in Korean literature.
Wow, it is quite moved.
I'm glad,
Yeah,
yes. Because it's
yeah.
both the sound, it's also when you read, but see, also visually, you know.
Yeah, please
This is
talk about your
yes.
stuff.
So this is a scarf by the eminent fashion designer Lee Sang-bong or Lee Sang-bong. And actually, it was a gift from the Korean Cultural Center, UK, about 12 years ago, I think. But yes, it's written in Hangul. And I always wear this when there's an event related to Korean literature, or if there's, because I think it's just visually as well. Speaking of audiovisual cultural content like film and animation media, but even just our script. And I think on Friday, you and I, when we met at the Olim exhibit opening, and, you know, we were mesmerized. We were very, impressed by all the things. But one thing you noted was, but there's no Hangul script. And I think I mentioned, I was like, yes, there's like visually, it's also just beautiful, which I can tell you, the UK members of, well, I shouldn't say the UK audience in general terms, but my students or people, many British people I've spoken to who know Korean, they've like commented time and again about how they find the script it looks very beautiful. Kind of interesting. It depends on the font as well.
Yeah.
This is more like script. Other times they say it looks like circles and sticks, which they find interesting. Yes.
And when I talk about Korean aesthetics, always I start 훈민정음 because the language itself and the Hangul itself, and we can write our emotions with our own language.
Exactly.
Yeah. So just when I was in 20s, I studied in Hanmun, classical Chinese text. Yeah, when I remember, but it's quite a totally different kind of language. It is almost impossible to express our subtle kind of emotions. But when we write in Korean language, it is Hangul, we can express our kind of subtle emotions. So now just when you say a kind of Hangul, it is the beauty, the starting point of beauty or the base of beauty. I am quite, it is really touching. It is my old memories was a kind of, and just Grace, you have a kind of long time real research. Just you can conclude Hangul is one of the very important resource of Korean beauty or kind in Korean literature.
And also because, as I said, I just provided that personal, like little anecdotal story about, because that's what actually got me to continue on with studying Korean literature after my undergraduate degree. Because yes, even though I knew Korean and even though I had studied Korean literature, but just kind of I fell in love with it all over again because of that. That's why. And that's kind of what basically brought me all the way here in terms of my career path.
And also, so I like your kind of talk about like a sculpture of language. Yeah, like creators in literature is like a sculpture of the language. Yeah, it is really, that is the beauty. Yeah. Yeah.